And good evening, everyone, and thank you for watching NBC6 Voices on our Facebook and YouTube pages. I am Jawan Strader. Well, this is a very important conversation we're going to have tonight. We're talking about the rash of shootings that have gripped parts of South Florida. Most recently, of course, the mass shooting. You can see the emotion from a parent after two people are killed outside of a banquet hall and more than 20 people injured. This is just one of what has become many. There was another one, a bizarre incident. A man could be seen firing a gun outside of a car window. Here's a look at some of those images in broad daylight going after another vehicle. And this happened right outside of a casino in Miami. And then a 10-year-old was shot in the chest following an exchange of gunfire in Opelika, and all because of a mistaken paint gun incident. We'll get more into that a little bit later. And then two people were shot on Miami Beach. So tonight, we're talking about plans to stop the violence this week. Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava called the recent shootings despicable. The mayor spoke this week promoting her peace and prosperity plan. Now, it includes increased spending on diverting at-risk children from more violent acts and internships, summer jobs, and counseling. There will also be more funding for police to monitor social media and an expansion of the county's existing surveillance cameras. Here's what she had to say.
We will do everything we can and use every resource available to bring these people to justice.
With the police response, we're joined by Miami-Dade Director Freddie Ramirez, Miami Police Chief Art Acevedo, and Commissioner Keon Hardeman. Welcome to the show, all of you, for this important conversation tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You got it. Well, my first question to all of you is this an at-risk youth problem? What the heck is going on? Why is it that we've seen more shooting now, more than I know I've seen since I've been here in South Florida in 17 years? I haven't seen it this bad. Director, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I mean, what we're seeing in our community right now is unprecedented. It's starting to reflect what you're seeing around the country. A lot of this stems off of our social media. Our youth are handling beefs on social media, and those beefs are manifesting themselves into acts of violent crime. And what we have is a small amount of people creating a lot of havoc, and it's not representative of this community. For the last months, our murder rates have been going down, but unfortunately, we've had these tremendous incidents that really have ruined families, have ruined lives, and it has to stop. We need the community's help. This community and our law enforcement community are mobilized to put a stop. We will not allow Dade County to become like the cities that are struggling right now. We're going to do this together.
Amen to that. Chief Acevedo, I know you just arrived here in South Florida, but you served in Houston. Houston had its share of problems as well when it came to gun violence. So I want to ask you, what are you seeing in your short time here? What are you seeing as maybe the root of this issue that's going on across our county?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the proliferation of firearms in this country. I mean, it is, we have more firearms than we have people. It's easy. Access to firearms is easy. You know, we have been pushing on the president of the Major State Chiefs Association. We've been pushing for federal legislation now for years, asking for universal background checks, asking to close the gun show loophole. I can just go on down the line. And unfortunately, both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, they're stuck in their corners, and they won't come to the middle to look for common sense solutions. And the other thing that's been going on across the country, this is not unique to Miami-Dade and South Florida, is the fact that our court systems have been backed up across the country because of COVID. And I'm really grateful that our judges here in Dade County, we met last week. We had a great meeting. They're moving quickly to get the system up and running 100%. Get the trials going, but there's a backlog of cases across the country with felons that have been charged, and that further exacerbates the problem. So it's been a perfect storm, but I think with the leadership of Freddie Ramirez and all the police chiefs here in Dade County, you're going to see us come together, coalesce, work together, and I'm confident we're going to bring some people to justice here sooner rather than later.
And that's good to see you both come together and work on this because this is an important issue and we need the support of law enforcement. So now I want to get to Commissioner Keon Hardeman. Commissioner, you helped spearhead that peace and prosperity plan with the mayor, Daniela Levine Cava. So I got to ask you, do you think that this will help combat some of these issues that we're seeing today?
I absolutely believe that it will help with some of the issues that we're seeing today. What you should understand is that gun violence is really a sign of the lack of investment, especially in the people and the places in urban communities. And so what you'll find is that where people do not have investment in themselves, they don't believe they have a future, they have hopelessness. And that hopelessness, I believe, leads to all types of crimes, but surely it leads to gun crimes like the ones we're seeing here in Miami-Dade County. I mean, this is a bit different than you're seeing all over the nation, but it yet is a reflection of what people choose to do with firearms that are in their possession.
And Chief Acevedo, I want to go back to you because I want to ask you because you mentioned about guns. So because gun violence is rising at an alarming rate. So what else is there to blame? Would you blame COVID, the fact that people are now getting out and about? Because of course, as the director mentioned, crime was down, but of course nobody was out. But now people are out and we're starting to see people out. I think social media was even mentioned as well. But why so much gun violence?
Well, again, look, it's a combination of everything, right? I can talk, commissioners, right on. You know, we have created a school to prison pipeline in this country. We've got to invest in young people. A lot of these young people are being seduced by the gang culture, by the culture that you go out and you see them on social media showing their gats, threatening each other. So I think it all starts with investing in young people and making sure that we give them opportunities so they can live full promise of their lives. And the other thing, quite honestly, that we're seeing is that now that everybody's back out, there has been a lot of pent up anger, a lot of pent up emotions. It's been really tough psychologically for people. And quite honestly, what I can tell you what we were seeing in Houston, and I'm sure Freddie can speak to this, or Director Ramirez can speak to this, is that when in the past people go to fisticuffs, people now are killing each other that know each other. It's not like they're strangers. There might even be friends, and they just, without thinking, just pull that gat or that gun, and they shoot, and then the rest is history. They end up, there's a lot of not stranger on stranger violence, but there's also known people shooting each other, and that's another cause for concern here, not just here, but across the country.
Director Ramirez, are you seeing cooperation from the community? You were out in the public eye recently. I mean, basically pleading with the public. You've been very vocal on social media as well. I read your tweets. You're very passionate. Are you receiving the type of cooperation that you want to receive from the community in efforts to help reduce crime?
Absolutely. This community is united. Unfortunately, there is that fear of retaliation. And we have to understand that. We have to respect that because they're in fear of a retaliation that you're seeing. There's a code of silence. But my message to the community, to those who are afraid to come forward, is you have to, because the next time it could be you, it could be someone who you love that it gets hurt by gun violence. Law enforcement is doing everything they can, and we can definitely do more, and we're going to be doing a whole lot more. But still, it always comes down to a collaboration with the community. And that's built off of trust. And that's what's special about our community, what I see. We have trust in this community. It's earned each and every day.
And Director Ramirez, I got to ask you this then. I'm seeing more brazen shootings than ever before. I would never have thought I would see in broad daylight a shooter hanging out the window with an automatic weapon, shooting, just going after another car in broad daylight. Here in South Florida, and then party after party after party involving children. And to be that brazen is something that I never thought before. It seemed like it was individual on individual, but now it's like they don't care anymore. What's going on here?
And that's what we're having now. What's manifesting itself is that we have killers in our community. We have cold-blooded killers, a small amount of people that are doing a lot of damage, that don't care about life, that don't care about community. And if they're going to go after their target over a stupidity, they will mow down anyone who's standing in their way. and we're seeing it time and time again. So those kind of people need to be in jail. Those aren't the people that are going to be saved by anything. They're already lost. They are terrorists of this community, and they need to be in jail because innocent people are dying, innocent people are suffering, and it's not right.
Commissioner Hardiman, I want to get back to you. What can county commissioners do before it gets to the level where it's worse than it is now? Because first of all, I didn't think we would see something like this. And come on now, Commissioner, you've been here a lifetime, aside from when you went to school, but we haven't seen anything like this in a while.
Well, I think the county commission hasn't invested resources to these issues in a very long time. And so you can't give $1 million here, $1 million there, and expect the neighborhood and the people who live there to improve. And so it's been neglected. And so I think what the commissioners have to do is come to grips with reality, to know that this is a real problem that needs investment in order to solve it. And so what that means is investing more in our police officers, investing more in our social programs, investing more in the neighborhoods as far as the brick and mortar, the residences, the housing, the businesses. You have to give people an opportunity to have a decent life in Miami-Dade County. If you look at our housing and public housing, I mean, it's some of the worst housing that we've seen in this nation. Why? Because the commission hasn't invested enough in these properties. And so when people don't believe that their lives are valued, that it's not worth being invested into, and no one's giving them an opportunity to succeed, then they're going to act the way that they act. And when you look at these children are the byproducts of individuals who are my age. And so this is like a cultivation of people who believe that their lives actually don't matter. And then if their lives don't matter, then why should they value yours?
And getting back to some of the programs, Commissioner, that you have set up with the Peace and Prosperity Plan, do you believe that it's going to take years before we see the manifestation from these programs?
I don't believe it'll take years. I think that we'll have an immediate effect because what we're going after are the children that are already in the court system that are the most difficult to touch, that we have an opportunity to actually pay them a living wage and they have meaningful employment in Miami-Dade County, have an opportunity to interact with individuals like who are on the screen today and actually build a future for themselves. And I'm asking for family members and parents to reach out to Miami-Dade County and tell them, I want my child in this program. We don't need the kids who are going to do well. I don't want kids who are already on their way to college. I want kids who are at a crossroad, who could go either way. And if we invest into those children today, I believe we'll have an immediate effect. And of course, we'll have an effect on the future. But most importantly, we'll have an opportunity to really bring more community back to the places that we love in Miami-Dade County.
Director Ramirez, I want to go back to you. Do you believe the shootings like the ones we've been seeing lately, like at El Mula, that they're more dueling factions or rather than just random acts of domestic terrorism?
They are targeted acts of violence, completely targeted, built off of, see, in the 90s, it was drug turf wars. What you have now is, there's drugs, there's that little component of gangs, but what you have now are vendettas built off of the social media, back and forth, that are manifesting themselves into violence. These are little groups. I don't even want to call them gangs because they're not gangs. They're a pack of wannabes that are doing a lot of violence, getting right to the guns, as it was said here. They don't feel any sensitivity about losing life. And it's got to stop. And we do have to invest in our community. That's why our mayor is pushing this program with the commissioner. We have to, the COVID has set us back. We need to invest in our communities. We got to give our children a chance. They haven't been in school. They haven't had a normal life for over a year. We got to reconnect with them and build an even prosperity for everyone here and keep this community as it's always been a shining light. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, you talked about investing in the community. So let's get to Chief Acevedo. Chief Acevedo, do you believe that putting more money and law enforcement resources to track, like, say, social media accounts will help prevent more gun violence?
Yeah, look, I think we have to do it's a two-pronged approach, right? We have to make the economic investments, the educational investments, the job program investments, all the stuff to deal with the kids that are at the crossroads, like the commissioner was saying. But at the same time, you have to realize that these individuals we're dealing with are not afraid of death. I mean, we listen to them on wires sometimes. The only thing they fear is going to prison. And part of the problem that we have in our country is that when prohibited people that are prohibited from having firearms or have a history of felony convictions are caught with firearms, there are almost next to no consequences. If we were to hold these guys accountable for being armed and in unlawful possession of a firearm in the front end, number one, we're going to keep them from doing something, hopefully, like murdering somebody or shooting somebody that's going to give them even worse consequences. But number two, they're not going to be carrying their guns all the time. And like Freddie was saying, they see so-and-so that disrespected them. Next thing you know, it's a crime of opportunity, and they go ahead. So we've got to take gun violations a lot more serious, and we have to invest in technology and in law enforcement resources, and from a restorative justice and I would say police reform standpoint, in better training, better equipment, and proper staffing for a region of the country that is exploding in terms of population growth, which is South Florida, as we all know, is a destination for the rest of the country right now.
All right. Well, I appreciate you, Commissioner Hardiman, Chief Art Acevedo, and Director Freddie Ramirez. Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation tonight. I appreciate you all.
Take care.
Well, we're going to continue our conversation with Daniela Pierre, the president of the Miami NAACP, and Romania Duke. She's the founder of Mothers Fighting for Justice. She lost her son to gun violence back in 2014. I consider her a close friend as well. And earlier this week, you were with Mayor Daniela Levine Cava at a news conference. Actually, it wasn't just Daniela Pierre. It was actually Romania as well. I saw you both there at the news conference when she announced that Miami-Dade police are working with the federal, state, and local authorities to bring those responsible for last week's violence and justice. Well, she also vowed to work harder than ever to break the cycle of gun violence and prevent the next tragedy. Of course, we've talked about that peace and prosperity plan. So, Daniela Pierre, let's start with you. What do you think of the mayor's plan?
Thank you so much for the question. And before I start, I want to extend condolences to all of the victims and their families for the recent gun violence happening in our community. As it relates to the mayor's new initiative, we support the plan. And let me tell you why. Because it talks and it has an aim to get to the root causes. We believe that the violence happens prior to the guns are even being picked up. So getting to the root causes of any type of violence in our communities is the best place to start. Additionally, the plan for peace and prosperity calls for more investment in our youth through the Fit to Lead program and bringing on a host of community partners to work to root out gun violence in our community.
Well, Daniela, in Miami-Dade County, homicides are up. A quarter of the victims are under 21. So what's needed to stop the violence?
Well, that investment is needed in our youth. And I believe it starts in our educational system. And I believe this is a collective and collaborative approach. It needs to start from the churches, from our schools, and even inside our homes. So that investment that will help support those families, to enrich those families, so they'll be able to have some support and be able to, continue to raise their children. Additionally, we have youth that have been away with the pandemic, so they need some interventions. Those interventions can come in the form of an internship, a job opportunity, and not just for the youth, the parents as well. Many of the parents may have been laid off, so this might be a prime opportunity for them to also re-enter the workforce or get some new upskilling and do a career change. Investment is needed into the community as well as into people. And I believe that components of the peace and prosperity plan will help to address that.
Amen. And Romania, at one point during the press conference,
You killed a good kid.
very distraught father interrupted that press conference. And it touched so many of us, especially if you're a parent. He lost his son. That's Clayton Dillard Sr. He lost his son, Clayton. So Romania, I reached out to you yesterday. You said you were still just having to deal with that pain that parents like you go through. I wanted to ask you, How did it feel seeing that? And can you describe just your emotions when you saw that, because you were there?
Yes. I seen him getting out the car because I had met him that night of the accident. And when I seen him coming, I was like, oh my God. But I was just heartbroken. It just brought up so much emotions in me. I just wanted to break down the car and break down and cry. And I was just standing there and I'm just looking back, trying to tell them, please get this father, because I know how he was going to react. And I was letting some of the officers know that, hey, just let him scream out whatever he has to do. He has to get it out because it's all bonded up inside of him, and it was inside of me. And I just had to comfort him. I just stepped away from the press conference and I went there, tried to console him, but they had already had got a hold to him. But I'm still staying in contact with him and the family.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because you stay busy. For those in the community that don't know, you stay busy with Mothers Fighting for Justice. So can you tell me how Mothers Fighting for Justice is helping to prevent future shootings?
Well, one is now we don't start helping seniors as well, because they have been affected by gun violence. And what I do is go in all the hotspot areas where these kids are at risk. They don't attend school, they don't attend churches, and those are the kids that I like to target. And I go in the communities and I sit and I talk with these kids. I tell them my story. And my story is that I lost a child to gun violence. I lost a son to senseless gun violence. I lost a son to prison. So they do listen to me because I have two stories to tell them. And all they need is for someone to listen to them. All those kids have backstories. And that's all we want to do. We want to help those kids. We want to reach out to those kids, to the parents. They already living in bad conditions. And just like everybody said on this panel, it's community effort, and that's what I'm trying to get my community more. That's my action, is just to get the community more involved, because once they get involved, we receive justice. He holds all the answers. They have all the answers for us to get justice in our community.
Amen. And Danielle, I want to go back to you. And I want to ask you both the same question here, because every time there's a deadly shooting, the response is pretty much the same. There's a lot of talk about thoughts and prayers and hope for reform. So what would you like to see done differently this time?
Well, let's face it, our community is not okay. So something I would like to see different this time and going forward is an immediate deployment of grief counselors. We've experienced way too much shooting this year, but we haven't had a great deal of grief counselors to come in to help us talk it through. Many of the situations that we see arising where it relates to violence, and that's any type of violence, could sometimes be solved by talking to the professionals. So we need grief counselors to help us deal and process this trauma. We're not okay, and we cannot act like we are.
Amen. Romania, your thoughts, because you've been through it.
Yes, the same thing. These kids are suffering from PTSD and don't even know it, as well as the family. They need help. We all need help in our community. Every day it's a deadly shooting or a shooting every day in our community. And I live in the South, so the response is slow getting to us. So I have to go on the scene. I have to make sure everything is okay. This is okay. This person is okay. And we really need this program basically down in the South area. We need help here. Everybody's suffering mentally. And time I hear shooting or have to see it's tearing me up emotionally and mentally as well. Like, we have a pain that don't never go away. No expiration date on our pain, and that's what I try to give to these parents. Once and all we get is, oh, I'm sorry, and prayers and all that. But sometimes we don't want to hear all of that. We need help.
Amen. Amen. And Danielle, I wanted to ask you one last question, and you kind of touched on it. You talked about investment in our community, but I want to know, how can communities of color, especially here in South Florida, play a role in stopping the senseless gun violence? How can they play a role? We know about investment from the politicians and the ones with the money, but how can I, in my community, play a role in stopping the gun violence?
So we have to first know that silence will not protect us.
That's right.
We have to stand together and speak up and speak out. If we know individuals who are committing crimes or even at risk of committing crimes, we have to speak up about it. We cannot just sit there and act like we did not hear about it. It's on us to speak up, to protect and defend our communities. No one else is going to do that but us. We have to do that. Additionally, on June 4th is National Gun Violence Awareness Day. We're asking everyone to join in and wear orange to say that you are standing against gun violence. We can all do this. You can do this by wearing an orange shirt. You can do something on social media. We have to come together collectively to say no more. We cannot afford to lose not one more child. We cannot afford to shatter not one more household. This is us. We have to say it ends with us. We must speak up, stand up, and collectively talk about if we know any crime, say something, call, remain anonymous. As the NAACP, we have pushed and pushed for more gun reform laws. We are asking for universal background checks. We always ask for sane and sensible gun law protection. It takes both sides of the House and the Senate to come together to make this a reality. And we understand that these gun reform laws are not going to protect the black market of people buying guns under the street. We have to bridge those loopholes. Let's get creative. We have to hold everybody accountable. This is our community. It's on us.
Very passionately said. Daniela Pierre and Romania Dukes, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight for this important conversation. And as you said, Daniela, my heart goes out to all of those families impacted by gun violence in our community as of late, because it has been so tragic here the past few days, the past few weeks. It must stop. It must come to an end. Romania Dukes, thank you for all you do for our community, sister, as always. And always appreciate having you on. And we definitely going to make sure you get that help and coverage that you need down south to let folks know what is going on down south, because there's a lot going on down there. We got to make sure that folks know that as well. But that's it for our show tonight. You can catch this program this Saturday morning on NBC6 at 9:30 a.m. right after the morning newscast. And be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Let me know what you thought about the show, about this all-important conversation. You can follow me at Jawan NBC6 on your Facebook or IG pages. And before we go, remember, education is the key to success. If you believe, you will succeed. We'll see you next time. Have a great week.